At Mom's funeral, Dad wasn't fazed at all, and he announced he will let me stay in Mom's house till I turn 18 as a good gesture. But then Grandpa called Mom's lawyer and his smile immediately turned into sorrow, because he realized Mom knew about him already and signed these papers before she passed away. It has been a long time since this incident has been on my mind, and I think sharing it with you guys will give me some perspective. So here's the deal. For as long as I can remember, my family was just Mom, Aunt Marie, and Grandpa. You might wonder, where's my dad? Well, he was like a mythical creature, heard of but rarely seen. Growing up, the whole dad thing was pretty much non-existent for me. In my 17 years of life, I feel like I saw my dad only a couple of times. The guy was a ghost, showing up only on special occasions like Christmas or birthdays. He'd swoop in with presents, act like father of the year for a hot minute, and then poof, gone again. As a kid, I was always waiting for him to come just so that he could leave again. It was just a long series of disappointments. The weirdest part was that Mom and Dad were still married. Don't ask me why, 'cause I've got no clue. It was like this bizarre arrangement that nobody talked about. Anyway, in the past few years, my mom got really sick due to lupus, an autoimmune disease she had. She was put on bed rest, which was particularly difficult for her since she could not accept the idea of sitting idle and not working. Ultimately, Aunt Marie took over the business, and Grandpa, Mom's dad, moved in to help out. Grandpa was a retired lawyer, and he was always organized, making sure everything ran smoothly. Our little family unit adapted to the new normal, with Aunt Marie balancing work and care, and Grandpa and I handling household affairs. So during this whole mess, suddenly Dad became more frequent with his visits. He would tell Aunt Marie and Grandpa to take a break, and he would handle everything. My aunt and Grandpa weren't a big fan of him either, so they quietly carried on with their duty. Initially, it was all very weird to me, but there was also a chance that I was being too judgmental, and maybe he was genuinely trying to be better this time. Apart from taking care of Mom, Dad would also spend a lot of time with me and talk to me about stuff. He even apologized to me a couple of times for not being around and said he would explain why once I was old enough. Although I hadn't forgiven him for his absence, I was happy that he was here by my side during this difficult time. But that happiness didn't last for long. Unfortunately, our care wasn't enough to help Mom, and she passed away. I was completely shattered. Mom was my best friend and soulmate, and I could not believe that I would never get to talk to her again. I also felt bad for Dad because he had recently gone to handle some work and he had been here with us the whole time but missed Mom's last moments. So we informed Dad about when we were having the services. On the day of the funeral, Dad was right on time. He looked sad, and it seemed like he genuinely missed his wife. Not only that, but he also gave a speech during the services about how incredible Mom was and that he never met somebody else who was as courageous as her. His words were moving, and many people got emotional listening to him. It almost felt like he was really mourning her loss, and I started to believe that maybe he had loved her in his own way. For that brief moment, I was sure that I had been too harsh in my judgment of him. But then, after everyone had left, the house was quiet, and the environment became tense. I saw Dad, and he looked nothing like he did before. His demeanor shifted from the grieving husband to something more distant and formal. What came next was so unexpected that I thought I was dreaming. Dad told me that he had made a decision. He would allow me to stay in my home until I turned 18. After that, I was supposed to move out of this place and would basically be on my own. I just stood there dumbfounded. Allow me, the place where I grew up, where all my memories with Mom were, was now out of the blue being snatched by my dad who had been missing in action his whole life. I was in shock. It felt like I was being kicked out of my own life. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Dad decided to play landlord with my childhood home. I gathered enough courage to ask my dad what made him think that he could evict me from my own house. He answered that he was my guardian now, and the guardian could take whatever decision he considered right. I was taken aback. Everything made sense now. This was why he had been so frequent with his visits in the last few months. It was him seeking assurance from my mom that everything she had would be as after her death. Aunt Marie and Grandpa were right to not trust him. It was like he heard my thoughts because he said that I had been spending too much time with my aunt and grandpa, and he was not going to let me meet them anymore. He had a couple more rules for me that I can't even go on right now. All of it made me question, why did I ever believe him when he said that he cared about Mom and me? After Dad dropped that bomb about letting me stay only till 18, things went from bad to worse. It was like he was making up for lost time by cramming 17 years of parental control into a few weeks. First, he started with my phone. For your own good, he said as he installed some creepy parental control app that basically turned my smartphone into a glorified brick. Suddenly, I couldn't text my friends without him seeing every message. Social media? Forget about it. Then came the curfew. Apparently, 700 p.m. was the new midnight. It's not safe out there, he'd say, conveniently forgetting that I'd been navigating the neighborhood just fine for years without his input. Some of you might think that this might be his way of showing that he cares for me. Well, let me tell you guys something. I have been excelling in my studies since I was a kid. I rarely went to any parties or sleepovers, so I wasn't known for being problematic. Mom also had some rules for me, and I gladly followed them. But this was definitely getting out of hand. The worst part though, he started vetting my friends. And by vetting, I mean interrogating them like they were suspects in a crime show. One of my best friends almost had a breakdown when he grilled her about her parents' occupations and her GPA. Every day, it felt like another piece of my life was being chipped away. I couldn't even go to the corner store without a full report on where I was going or who I'd be with and when I'd be back. The final straw came when he announced that he was planning to homeschool me. Yeah, right. More like isolating me from the last bit of normalcy in my life. His intentions were clear. Not only did he plan to steal all of Mom's assets and make sure I didn't get any of it, but he also wanted to make my life hell as long as he possibly could. I was done. I couldn't take any more of this policing. So one night when he was away, I called my friend Lisa and asked her to call my aunt. I couldn't directly call Aunt Marie because my father had deleted her number from everywhere, and also he would have killed me if he found out that I talked to her. Thank God for Lisa, cause she didn't hesitate even for a second. Lisa left me a note the next day at school with Aunt Marie's response. That weekend, while Dad was out on one of his mysterious errands, Aunt Marie and Grandpa showed up at our door. The look on their faces when I spilled everything was unforgettable. They were furious at the same time. They told me that they had news of their own that was bound to get my father's attention. Let's just say Dad had no idea what my family had in store for him. The most important thing at that time was to get out of that house as soon as possible. So before Dad could come, I packed my stuff and went to stay at Aunt Marie's place. It was tough leaving my childhood home where all my memories with Mom were, but I was going to make sure this getaway was not permanent. The very next day, my father was out of control, looking everywhere for me and asking all of our relatives for my whereabouts. I was honestly a little confused by this because isn't this what he wanted? Me out of his house? But clearly, he wasn't done. My aunt called him, and on my grandpa's advice, she told him that he would meet him at the diner near my home. Of course, my father was not very reasonable to begin with cause he was busy screaming, but somehow Aunt Marie convinced him. When the day arrived, we were all set to break the big news to Dad. We spotted Dad instantly. He was sitting in a booth, looking like he'd been through a war. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a split second, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The second Dad laid eyes on me, he exploded. He jumped up, causing a scene that had every head in the diner turning our way. He was enraged, and I could do nothing but hide behind Grandpa. Aunt Marie, thank God for her, stepped in like a boss. She shot Dad down with just a few words and a look that could freeze hell over. It was pretty impressive, actually. She managed to make Dad sit his butt back down without even raising her voice. As we all slid into the booth, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Dad's eyes were darting around like a cornered animal, especially when he noticed the thick manila envelope Grandpa was carrying. You could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out what was going on. I was as impatient as you might be while reading this because they hadn't told me anything either. That's when Grandpa dropped the first bomb. He told Dad that Mom knew. She knew everything. At that moment, I was even more confused than Dad. He tried to play dumb, but the panic in his eyes was a dead giveaway. He knew exactly what Grandpa was talking about. Aunt Marie then laid it all out. Dad stole money from Mom's company, but that wasn't the biggest news. Before I could process anything, I was told that Dad had another family in Nebraska. Everything felt like I'd been sucker punched. Another family, embezzlement, just when I thought this whole situation couldn't get any more messed up, it did. My head was spinning trying to process all this new information. Apparently, I knew nothing about Dad. But Grandpa wasn't done. He pulled out a stack of papers from the envelope and explained that Mom had made some arrangements before she passed. The house, the business, everything. It was all in a trust for me. Dad had no claim to any of it, as Aunt Marie was in charge of it. As Dad flipped through the documents, his face went pale. He, of course, tried to bust his way out of it. He claimed it couldn't be legal and threatened to fight it, but Aunt Marie shut that down real quick. She hinted that if he tried anything, the IRS and his other wife might find out about his creative accounting. That shut him up pretty fast. Everything that was happening was so surreal. As a kid, I told myself that Dad was a busy guy and his job came in the way of him being with his family all the time. But no, all this time, he had a family to spend time with, another wife, maybe even another kid. It broke my heart that he was capable of loving and caring, just not for me and my mom. Anyway, Grandpa laid out the terms. If Dad walked away and signed the papers renouncing any claim to Mom's estate, they'd keep his secrets. If he fought it, well, let's just say the implications were clear. Dad didn't really have a choice, and he understood that clearly. But he didn't need any reason to make a scene. In classic narcissist fashion, he lashed out and started to scream at my aunt and Grandpa, calling them liars and cheaters and whatnot because they were stealing money from Mom. Funny coming from him. Grandpa tried to calm him down by reminding him that we were in public, but there was no chance Dad was going to listen. When his unnecessary shouting didn't work, he started telling me that he always loved me and he knew that he made a mistake but was willing to work on everything. That was followed by a meaningless apology for isolating me in my own home and a promise that my home would not be taken away from me. He brought up Mom, trying to use her memory as emotional leverage. He started talking about how much she would have wanted us to be a family and how she always believed in second chances. If he had said all of this to me earlier, I would have forgiven him, but now he had backstabbed me, and he was not getting away with it. A normal, sane human being would probably give up by now and accept defeat, but Dad, he brought up his other family in this god-awful discussion and that they would become homeless if I didn't help them. Dad knew that I wouldn't want to punish innocent people for his mistakes, and this manipulation could work well. He was wrong. I wasn't going to buy into his act anymore. I made it very clear that when I actually needed a father figure, he wasn't there, and now I didn't need a manipulative dad like him to destroy my already messed up life. After that, Dad stormed out of the room, ending his speech with something to the effect of, "You will regret this, or this is not over." To be honest, although I glossed over his speech at the time, the part where he talked about his other family actually made me rethink everything. It wasn't something I had fully considered before. The thought of potentially taking away someone else's shelter weighed heavily on my mind. This is exactly the reaction he was looking for, and sadly, he was getting it. So here I am, asking for your opinion so that I can finally have some guidance on this matter. Am I really in the wrong for not letting my dad get away with his manipulations and deceit? I understand that there are complex emotions in relationships at play here, but I can't shake the feeling that holding him accountable is the right thing to do. I'm torn between standing up for myself and being mindful of the impact my decisions might have on others. Any advice on how to proceed with this complicated situation? Update 1. It's been a few weeks since the showdown at the diner, and I thought things would finally settle down. I could not have been more wrong. Turns out Dad wasn't about to go down without a fight, and he decided to take the low road. Like we're talking new levels of low. It started with a phone call from my cousin Jessie. She was in tears, asking me how I could have done something so horrible. I had no clue what she was talking about, but it didn't take long to figure out Dad had been busy alright, busy spinning a web of lies so intricate it would make a spider jealous. According to the story Dad was spreading, I had conspired with Aunt Marie to slowly poison Mom over the years, weakening her immune system and making her lupus worse. He claimed we did this so I could inherit her wealth sooner. As if that wasn't bad enough, he also said that we had manipulated Mom's medication, switching out her pills for placebos to speed up the process. But wait, it gets worse. Dad told everyone that he had suspected something was wrong, which was why he started coming around more often towards the end. He painted himself as this heroic figure trying to save Mom from her own daughter and sister. According to him, that's why I was so hostile towards him, because I was afraid he'd uncover our evil plot. The lies didn't stop there. He spun this elaborate tale about how he'd found evidence of our scheme, fake pharmacy receipts, suspicious bank transfers, even a diary where I supposedly detailed our plans. Of course, none of this evidence actually existed, but he was convincing enough that some relatives were buying it. Dad even went as far as to claim that Grandpa was in on it too, but had been manipulated by Aunt Marie. He said that Grandpa was aging and that's why it was easy for us to convince him to be part of our schemes, and that Aunt Marie had taken advantage of this to turn him against Dad. The stories kept getting wilder. Dad told some relatives that he'd overheard Aunt Marie and me discussing our plans late one night, plotting how to alter Mom's will. To others, he said he'd found mysterious substances in the kitchen that he believed were being used to poison Mom's food. He didn't stop at family either. Dad started spreading these rumors in the community, telling Mom's old colleagues, our neighbors, even my school teachers. It was like he was on a mission to destroy not just my inheritance but my entire life. The impact was immediate and devastating. Relatives who had always been kind to me suddenly became cold and distant. I started getting dirty looks at the grocery store and whispers followed me wherever I went. Some of my friends' parents even forbade them from hanging out with me, afraid I was some kind of sociopath. It was a nightmare. I go to check the mail and find anonymous letters calling me a murderer. My social media accounts were flooded with hateful messages from people I'd never even met. It felt like the entire world had turned against me overnight. Aunt Marie and Grandpa weren't spared either. Aunt Marie's business started suffering as clients pulled out, not wanting to be associated with someone accused of such a heinous act. Grandpa, who had always been a respected figure in the community, was now being treated like a mentally unstable old man who couldn't be trusted. The worst part was some people were actually believing this garbage. I mean, I get it. It's a juicy story, the evil daughter, the manipulative aunt, the helpless father trying to save his wife. It's like something out of a bad soap opera. But this was my life, and it was being torn apart by these lies. We tried to fight back, of course. We released statements showing people Mom's medical records, even had her doctors confirm that her treatment had been standard and her decline was due to the natural progression of her disease. But you know how it is. Lies travel faster than the truth, especially when there's this sensation. There were moments when I almost broke down, like when Mrs. Johnson, our neighbor who had known me since I was in diapers, crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Or when I overheard my childhood best friend's mom telling her to stay away from that murderer girl. It felt like my entire world was crumbling around me. But you know what? As horrible as it was, it only showed me who my real friends were. A small group stuck by me, refusing to believe the lies no matter how convincing they seemed. They became my rock, reminding me of who I really was when the world was trying to tell me otherwise. It's safe to say my family and I are not giving up. We know that Dad is not smart enough to cover all the cracks in his story, and I'm sure we will find some of it. Till then, I'm grateful to all of you for listening to my rant. I'll be back very soon. Update 2. After the chaos Dad unleashed with his lies, Aunt Marie and I decided it was time to go on the offensive. We needed to find out the whole truth, and that meant tracking down Dad's other family. Aunt Marie, as it turned out, had some serious detective skills. We started with a little information we had, a city name and a vague recollection of Dad mentioning Ida once. It wasn't much, but Aunt Marie worked her magic. She cross-referenced Dad's credit card statements and social media check-ins, and even dug up some old mail forwarding requests. Within a week, we had an address. So as the weekend rolled around, we drove to the suburban neighborhood where Dad's other family possibly lived. After a little cruising in the neighborhood and asking people for a lady named Linda, we found her place. When Linda opened the door, the confusion on her face was clear as day. As we introduced ourselves, when I revealed that her husband was my dad, she initially thought it was some elaborate prank. But then we showed her the proof, photos, legal documents, and some other stuff that we had. We watched as the realization dawned on her face. We told her that we had some matters that we wanted to discuss with her. She invited us in, and our conversation about everything began. Apparently, Linda and Dad were not married. They were in a relationship for the past 15 to 16 years, which basically means Dad had been cheating on Mom ever since I was born. I also met her kids, who look kind of like me, which was just one more weird thing in my life right now. As we sat in their living room, surrounded by family photos that felt both familiar and alien, we told them everything: Mom's illness, Dad's absence, the inheritance drama, and his recent smear campaign. Linda was just as stunned as we were. She confessed that she had always wondered about Dad's job. The money never quite added up, but with 2 kids and all the bills, she hadn't wanted to question it too much. And as we talked more, pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Dad had told Linda he was an international business consultant, which explained his frequent absences. He'd even created a fake company website to back up his story. But there was more. Dad had been telling Linda that he had a chronic illness that required frequent hospital stays. That's how he explained his absences to her. He'd even gone as far as to fake medical documents and had Linda drop him off at the hospital for treatments. The more we talked, the more we realized how expertly Dad had played us all. He'd created two completely separate lives, using our trust and love against us. Linda was devastated but also angry. She'd sacrificed so much, worked extra jobs to support the family when Dad's consulting work had dry spells. All of it based on lies. As the day passed, I felt like there was an unexpected bond between all of us. We were all victims of the same man's lies and deceit. After hours of discussion, I asked Linda if she would come with us to confront Dad and settle this matter once and for all. I made it very clear that I did not want her to feel pressured to be part of this, and she should only do this if she's comfortable with everything. Despite the shock and hurt she was experiencing, Linda agreed without hesitation. She said that she was determined to help in any way possible. Linda said that she would come to the city herself and would be there in 2 days. So with that, my aunt and I decided that it was time to return and prepare ourselves for the next confrontation coming our way. Hopefully, it will be our last. As always, you guys will know as soon as the next thing happens. Thanks again for reading my soap opera-like story. Till next time. Update 3. Hi guys, how are you? I finally confronted my dad about everything, but before we get into that, I also wanted to address some questions about Linda. The major questions were if I was sure that I could trust Linda and what if she was also playing a part in my dad's vindictive plan. Well, Aunt Marie and I did a lot of research to make sure that we were trusting the right person. While my aunt looked up as many documents as she could, I searched Linda's and her kids' social media. Judging based on their lifestyle, they would definitely not be involved in way too much luxury. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't there be some signs of them wasting away the money they had stolen from someone else? On the other hand, whenever Dad came by our home, he would always be seen in a new tailored suit with expensive gifts. Also, Linda seemed genuine. My mom had to take care of everything in her life, and even though she had Grandpa and Aunt Marie by her side, it was still hard. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be for Linda to take care of her 2 kids while her partner was missing in action. I sympathized with her state and wanted her to know the truth so that both of us could move on for good. Anyway, getting back to what happened with Dad, after Linda arrived, the 4 of us, Grandpa, my aunt, Linda, and I, paid him a visit at the same diner where he made a scene last time. I was surprised that he was still allowed there given the fact that the manager was very angry with him that day. It seemed like he had prepped for another argument, but all that changed when he saw Linda. He realized his 2 worlds were colliding. For a moment, he looked like he might bolt, but Grandpa's steady presence at the diner's entrance stopped him in his tracks. I was honestly scared of him because he was glaring at me the whole time as if everything was my fault. The whole conversation was so intense and emotionally taxing. Dad tried to lie his way out, but faced with both families, his web of lies quickly fell apart. Linda, showing remarkable strength, laid out every inconsistency, every lie he had told her over the years. I shared my own experiences, the years of absence and neglect. The tension in the air could be cut through a knife as we all confronted the man who had deceived us for so long. As the truth came pouring out, Dad's carefully constructed facade crumbled. He broke down, admitting to his double life, the lies, and the manipulations. He spoke of feeling trapped, of one lie leading to another until he was in too deep to find a way out. It wasn't an excuse, but it offered a glimpse into the troubled mind of the man who had caused us so much pain. I could tell that Linda pitied him a little bit, but not me. He had done irreversible damage to me and basically traumatized me at the lowest point in my life. I was just glad he was finally owning up to what he had done. In the end, it was Linda who took charge. She calmly told him what would happen next. Dad would come clean to everyone, family, friends, and colleagues, and do damage control for all the rumors he spread about Aunt Marie and me. He would seek professional help and therapy to address the issues that led him to create this elaborate deception. And most importantly, he would take responsibility for his actions and make amends. If not, this could easily be turned into a legal battle, and he would get sued. As for us, we decided to take things one day at a time. Linda and I exchanged contact information, agreeing to stay in touch and support each other through the challenging times ahead. For now, Aunt Marie is going to move in with me. It's a new world for Aunt as well, because she has to handle the business all by herself now. I have also gotten into therapy because everything that happened till now has taken a toll on me. I miss my mom a lot, and I keep wondering if things would have unfolded this way if she was here. We're all trying to adjust to the new normal, and it's going to be a long road. But with the support of each other, we're hopeful for a better future. I also want to thank all of you again for your support and encouragement.